So we're in the mountains today. We've got about a 15-foot bank with a road cut, and above that bank we've got a really steep mountainside with a lot of down trees all over it, including some trees that are actually sliding down the landslide even though they're still rooted and standing up. So I've scrambled up the bank. I've got my rope for my groundsman down there. I'm working my way up above this giant mess, which, by the way, we already cleaned up everything we could from the ground, and now I'm having to go up above the road to do the rest of it. Scrambling up the mountain here in order to find an anchor point so I can get back down to these huge trees that are fallen over and tangled up and really dangerous for anyone or anything that's going by on the road right below. Hard to see how steep it is from this GoPro effect, but I'd say the mountainside is maybe like 50 to 70 degrees, just a guess. And then of course the road cut has like a 10 to 15 foot vertical bank. There you can see one of the treetops that's hung up. Whole entire tree broke off and fell over. Let's get my first anchor point set up here. Basically just using my rings there just to keep my rope cleaner, because this whole area has been burnt by forest fire. So if my rope is rubbing across that thing, it's going to get all dirty. Now I'm just rappelling down the hillside, trying to get access from above where I can safely start clearing all this stuff away, cutting it up. Rope management. Watch a bunch of climbing videos and they'll all talk about rope management. Keep your rope under control at all times. This is kind of a weird situation because I'm climbing and I'm locked in to my anchor point and my harness, but I'm still on the ground and I'm on a slope, so I gotta kind of keep my mind on my rope, as I'm about to be dropping a bunch of stuff basically right where it is. There's another view of the biggest tree that's hung up. You can see it's fallen over, broken off. You can kind of see the stump there in the middle of the screen. Here's my anchor point. And now I'm going to pull up my pull saw in order to start cutting this thing away as safely as possible. Yeah, this whole situation is just a tangled mess. It's dirty, it's steep, it's slippery. There's trees stuck on other trees, hung up, halfway fallen down a super steep mountain. We've been trying to do this as safely as possible, but it is a fairly sketchy situation. Right there you can actually see there's a hole directly below where I'm standing. And as it turns out, that hole is actually from where that double trunk tree right there has started sliding down the hill. And I don't have footage of it, but when I fall that tree later on in this workday, the entire root ball starts lifting off the ground as the tree first starts falling over. It's actually pretty sketchy, but luckily the root ball stayed put and the tree went over fine. Here, I'm just starting to clear up some access so I can start cutting these tops off and get this thing down on the ground. Yeah, so right there you get a better view of that hole, and if you look closely, you can actually see light down below it. So this entire bank is just undercut and overhung with that tree growing up there and the other tree fallen over and leaning and hung up on top of it. So I'm very carefully cutting this first top. Do not want to get my saw pinched in this situation. It'll be almost impossible to recover it. First top only fell a few feet, it's hung up on more branches. Looks like I'm going to get the next top out of here. And then hopefully it'll fall down. Nope, also hung up. Cut a few more branches out of the way. And then I got to figure out what else to cut to get all these things down on the ground because they're just hanging right now. If you guys have ever used a pole saw much, you know they get pretty heavy pretty quick. And let me tell you, in this scenario where I've got my anchor point on one side of me and I'm reaching way out on the other side of me trying to use this pole saw with the head extended, oh, it gets so heavy so fast. And there we're just getting my rope away from the area where all that stuff's about to fall, just so that it doesn't get tangled up. Rope management again. And then I finally realized there was another branch coming out right from the base of this tree that's holding everything. So Hopefully cutting this branch will let it all get down to the ground where it can be safely processed. So I'm just trimming up as much as I can reach before I release this whole thing that's sitting on that trunk right there. And basically you just want to kind of clean it up as much as you can so that you've got as much control as possible and there's fewest things going on as possible, because you only want to deal with one thing moving at a time if possible. Got to be super careful here again not to get the pole saw pinched and basically lose it and have it trapped in the tree. There's a lot of tension and compression right here where I'm cutting, so got to be extra cautious. And the tree only goes a few feet because it just basically hangs up on the next trunk over. But luckily I can make the exact same cut again, and hopefully that'll help it start dropping down toward the road below. Okay, so that was a good first step there. Getting that thing at least down where it's sitting on the ground and I can access it with a chainsaw instead of having to access it with that pole saw. So now that it's down on the ground and it's off of that other tree, I'm going to climb back up. I'm going to climb all the way around this grove of redwoods that I'm anchored onto, set up a different anchor further off to the left, and then I'm going to attack the downed tree and the other trees that are below it, just with a chainsaw from a slightly different anchor point. Okay, here's my new anchor point. I'm testing it out to make sure it's strong just by hanging on it really quickly. There's my next point where I'm going to lower down to. I dragged my rope all around. I'm going to have to work it down the hill, get it out of the way of everything falling. If you look at the angles between the trunks of all these trees and the ground, you can see just how steep this mountain is. The GoPro effect kind of makes it look less steep, but it's too steep to really go on without being tied into something. Now I'm getting my chainsaw. Poor chainsaw got dragged up through the dirt. It's all dirty. I don't like that very much. So at this point, I've gotten to my next point where I'm ready to start cutting. I got to yank on my chainsaw a few times because the air filter is a little bit overdue for a cleaning. But here I go, starting to take this giant tree apart from a different area here. It's all dirty from where it was sliding down the hillside, but we're making it work. Okay, now for the scary part. I'm using this raggedy old stump as a redirect so I can go even further across the hillside, further away from my anchor point. Really starting to feel pretty exposed at this point because my anchor point is nowhere near above me anymore. Now here's one of the sketchier parts of the whole job. You just watch what happens as I cut through this tree. The butt end is going to fall down 15-20 feet down to the road, and the top that I was cutting on earlier with the pole saw is about to come up and get too close to me. There it is. It stopped maybe 5 or 10 feet away from me, but definitely a sketchy situation. That is why you cut off all the branches ahead of time and try to get as much control of this thing as possible and make it as simple as possible. Now I gotta get that other big piece out of the way because it's basically just sitting there. You can see the stump higher up the hill. It just broke off the stump. And I gotta crawl out across there and try to wiggle my way over. Meanwhile, I'm like directly above a 15 or 20 foot tall vertical bank with very little to hold on to below me on a slippery, muddy hillside. Okay, so finally made it over safely to the next area, and it's time to cut this log free and get it to drop down. It was too heavy to pull off there in one piece, so I'm cutting it in half. There goes the first piece, slamming down to the road below. And the second piece should just be a simple matter of grabbing it and flipping it off of that base of that tree and letting it drop down. And of course, when you want it to move, it just wants to sit there. But I think with a few solid kicks, I'll be able to get it down. And unfortunately, this is about where my GoPro battery died, so be sure to check out part 2 of this video where I'm falling one of these trees off of this steep hillside.